Chapter 10 continued, Kiana Rubini. So Mr. Kermit is famous. If Mom still remembers what he did way back when, that counts as fame. Okay, it was a bad thing, but so what? On reality TV shows, the biggest stars are always the jerks. Besides, cheating scandal or not, I can't forget how he spoke up for our class to Mrs. Vargas. And how about fought for Barnstorm's right to stay with the football team? He may not be much of a leader, but I'm more convinced than ever that he's one of the good guys. I'm most anxious to get to school the next day, and it just isn't. I'm almost anxious to get to school the next day, and it isn't just because Chauncey is barking the house down with whooping cough. When I get into room 117, though, Mr. Kermit is absent. We have a substitute, Mrs. Landsman. Mr. Kermit's not exactly a young guy, but Mrs. Landsman is really old. Raheem does a quick sketch of her, rising from the grave as part of his zombie apocalypse. The kid is really talented. The picture makes the rounds of the class by paper airplane. Dawn of the Dead, hisses Mateo when the portrait lands on his desk. No talking, Mrs. Landsman orders. Too late, a nickname's born. She's Dawn of the Dead, or Dawn for short. She's grouchy, but we should be used to that by now. Our regular teacher being a gold medalist at the Grouch Olympics. It feels different, though. Dawn crabs at us, while Mr. Kermit just crabs because crabbing is his natural state. So when some of it lands on us, we don't take it personally. We just happen to be in the same room. Dawn is yammering on about the Battle of Gettysburg when I hear a power hum, low but growing in volume. At first, I'm afraid that the school is about to blow up, but then I realize the sound is coming from the desk next to me, Aldo. His face is almost as red as his hair as he devotes all his breath to maintaining the sound. Now the hum is coming from behind me at a slightly different pitch. I risk a glance over my shoulder. Barnstorm's doing it too. A look of unholy glee on his face. Next, the noise drops at least an octave. Elaine buzzing like a bassoon. Well, we Californians know how to prank a sub as well as anyone, so I jump right in. Pretty soon, SC8 is vibrating. Alarmed, Dawn of the Dead puts in a call to the custodian. As soon as Mr. Carstairs pops in, we stop humming. It happened just a second ago, the substitute teacher insists. It sounded like a problem with the wiring. The custodian rakes us with a rueful look. It's the kids, ma'am. They're messing with you. They do it to all the subs. Dawn doesn't like that. For a minute there, I'm afraid we're going to have a real zombie apocalypse on our hands. But in the end, what can she do besides yell? She does a whole lot of that. It's pretty jarring when you're used to Mr. Kermit, who barely speaks at all. We fight back. We do the old drop a textbook trick at least 20 times. Barnstorm drums with his crutches on the floor. Elaine pretends to be asleep, which is odd because Raheem stays awake and alert. Mateo speaks to the substitute and Dothraki and does all his written work in elven runes. That's right, I said work. Dawn of the Dead is trying to run this like an actual class. Who does she think she is? Take out your math books, she announces. What math books? Barnstorm returns. Surely there's math books. Her frustration is growing. How much do you study math? We do worksheets, Mateo supplies. What worksheets? I don't see any worksheets. There should be lesson plans here. Of course there should, if we had a normal teacher. But Dawn of the Dead doesn't know Mr. Kermit. Maybe she thinks we ransacked the classroom before she arrived and threw out all of the notes on how she was supposed to run the day. Whatever the reason, she's getting madder and madder. With no lesson plans to go by, Dawn finds a language arts paragraph in some random book, but then she chooses Parker to read it out loud, so obviously he takes forever to sound out the first word, and because we've been giving her a hard time all day, she picks now to decide that somebody's yanking her chain, when Parker's the only one who isn't. So she sends him to the principal's office. 60 seconds later, we hear a pickup truck with a broken muffler start up and peel out of the parking lot. You know he didn't do that on purpose, I tell Dawn. He has a reading problem and he's sensitive about it. Miss Fountain comes over and tries to calm everybody down by inviting us to circle time. Circle time? Dawn is outraged. These students are too old for circle time, and so are yours. Miss Fountain seems to be about to launch into her speech on how no one is too old for positive reinforcement, but then she takes a good look at Dawn of the Dead, who actually might be. She beats a hasty retreat to her own class. When the bell finally rings at 3:30, Dawn of the Dead tells us that we've been the most disrespectful class she's ever met in her long teaching career, and we should be ashamed of ourselves. My son went to this school. He's a successful journalist now, and he'd be appalled to see what's become of this place that gave him his education. You students are a new low. I don't think you'd ever behave for Mr. Kermit the way you behaved for me today. As we listen to her sensible heels clicking down the hall, a strange quiet descends on room 17. Yeah, well, Mr. Kermit isn't a cranky old bag like you, Aldo tosses after her when she's too far away to hear it. The thing is, she's right, Raheem muses, brow furrowed. We wouldn't behave that way for Ribbit. I wonder why. I could have answered that, because even though Mr. Kermit kind of ignores us, he knows we're his class and he sticks up for us when we need it. He likes us, in his own way, and I'd never be able to explain to the others, but I think in our own way, we might be starting to like him too. When Mr. Kermit enters room 117 the next morning, he's greeted by a sight he's never seen before. The seven of us, quiet and attentive, seated at our desks, hands folded, eyes front. Let's face it, there's no way Dawn of the Dead said anything good about us yesterday. This, then, is payback time, and none of us are looking forward to it. You can feel the tension in the air as we wait for a teacher to let us have it. Mr. Kermit sets his newspaper and his coffee down on his desk, and he looks from face to face. What? Nobody answers, so he starts handing out the first worksheet of the day. The instant the papers hit our desks, there's a pen in every hand and all heads are down. Out of the corner of my eye, I see the teacher pull up short, frowning. This is another first. The entire class is hard at work, no airplanes circling overhead, no talking. He shrugs and returns to his desk, peering down at his crossword puzzle. I turn my attention to the assignment, which is about current events, and I think hard about what I've seen lately in the news, on the internet, and in social media. The intercom buzzes to life. Mr. Kermit, comes the voice of the secretary. Principal Vargas is available this morning if you'd like to discuss Mrs. Landsman's report on your students from yesterday. You can almost hear the jarring sound of a needle scratching across a vinyl record. We all freeze, staring up at our teacher. If Dawn of the Dead filed a report, you can bet she gave us a Z-. No, Mr. Kermit replies. Thanks anyway. That gets our attention. Is Mr. Kermit so detached from reality that he doesn't think anything that happened yesterday was bad? Or is it that he never read Dawn's report, just like he never reads any of our work? The mood 117 lightens a little. Whatever the reason, it looks as if we might be off the hook. It occurs to me that maybe Mr. Kermit never reads our stuff because none of the Unteachables ever hand in anything worth reading. That's an easy fix. There's an easy question on the back of today's worksheet, and I make up my mind to knock it out of the park. The prompt is about mass transit, subways, buses, and light rail trains. I believe in that kind of thing anyway. I'm from LA, where the transit systems are a joke. And what do we get for it? Traffic jams and pollution. Pretty soon, the entire page is full, and I'm only getting started. I approach Mr. Kermit's desk. Ribbit has pushed his puzzle aside. He's examining a memo from the office. I catch the heading, Report of Substitute Teacher, across the top. He notices me, and I search his eyes for any reaction to what has to be a horrible rundown of the day with a class of unteachable barbarians. Are you really mad at us? I ask in a small voice. He looks at the question like the question never occurred to him. There are two sides to every story, he finally says. He reaches down and slides the report into the trash can. Is there something I can do for you? He adds, obviously wishing I would go away. Can I have more paper? His brow furrows. For what? My essay, I ran out of space. That causes kind of a stir in our class. In SCS 8, kids do too little work, never too much. Mr. Kermit's back into his puzzle now. It's almost as if he's hoping that I'll forget what I asked for and leave him alone. So can I have it? I persist. He looks blank. The paper. Yes, fine. Well, where is it? He gets up from his desk and surveys the room, and it's like he suddenly found himself in some strange and exotic location, a place he's never seen before. He leads me to a storage closet and opens the door. Empty, except for the cobwebs. He turns to me, completely helpless. Maybe Miss Fountain has extra paper, I suggest. I'm on it. Parker bolts for the door so suddenly that he knocks over the desk and goes flying. He face plants on the floor, springs right back up, and disappears into the hall. The next thing we hear is Miss Fountain's voice from the next room. Parker, you're bleeding! He has a driver's license, Barnstorm sneers. The kid can barely walk. Parker's back a few minutes later, holding a wad of pink-stained paper towels to his bloody nose. He hands me a sheaf of lined paper, also pink-stained. I fill in 4 full pages before I'm done with my essay, and I'm pretty satisfied with it. I know I'm just a short-timer, but I can't let my work habits go totally down the drain while I'm here. I'm going to have to be ready to hit the ground running when I get back to my real school in California. I march up to the front and hand in my paper to Mr. Kermit. He looks at me like I've just presented him with a plate of baby scorpions. It's my essay, I reply to the question he probably won't ask. I can't wait to hear what you think. He accepts the papers, places them on the corner of the desk, and goes back to his crossword. Aren't you going to read it at press? Of course, he assures me without looking it up. 3 days later, the pages still sit in the corner of his desk untouched. Parker's blood spots are turning brown. Chapter 11, Barnstorm Anderson. Thanks to Ribbit, I'm still on the Golden Eagles. It's the nicest thing any teacher ever did for me. Not that I love teachers so much, it's their fault that I'm in SCS 8. I'm not unteachable, and I'm definitely not stupid. I'm just like any other kid. I can learn, but if you give me the choice not to, I'll pick that. They were totally cool with letting me slide so long as the trophies kept coming, but now that I can't play anymore, all of a sudden, my grades aren't up to scratch. Funny how that wasn't a problem last year when I beasted in 3 sports. I load up my tray in the food line and hobble out of the cafeteria. It's not easy to balance a big lunch when you're on crutches. As I scan the tables, this 7th grade girl I don't know, real cute, smiles and waves at me. This happens to athletes a lot. We're kind of celebrities around the school. I'm trying to figure out how to wave back without dropping either my lunch tray or a crutch. When her gaze veers off to my left, she's not looking at me at all. She's waving to Karnowski, one of my teammates on the Golden Eagles, who's coming up beside me. It's like a gut punch. Karnowski, the scrub who never even got off the bench before I landed on the injured list. Now he's somebody, and I'm somebody you look right through. Sup, Anderson, he mumbles, stepping in front of me. He and the girl connect and take the last 2 seats at the front table, the best location. Last year, half a dozen people would have scrambled to make room for Barnstorm Anderson. Not anymore. I take a hint. I'm a Golden Eagle, but not really. What have I done for them lately? If I can't put points on the board today, I'm dead to them. Not even Ribbit can change that. I keep on hobbling, head held high. I'll die before I let them see I care. It stinks that moving across the cafeteria has to be a major operation. The way I could move used to be what made me who I am. I guess that means I'm nobody, at least not till next year. Another problem. I've hung out with jocks for so long I got nowhere else to go. I set my lunch down next to Aldo and Raheem. As I lean my crutches against the side of the table, one of them tips over and whacks Aldo in the shoulder. Hey, he barks angrily. Chill out, it was an accident. It wasn't an accident. In my athlete days, my mind was always in the field or on the court or juking and cutting, faking imaginary defenders out of their jockstraps. Now that I'm off sports, I don't do that anymore, and my poor mind has nothing to focus on. So I spend my time thinking of ways to get a rise out of Aldo. It's almost too easy. Aldo is half-heartedly eating a bowl of split pea soup while gazing over at Kiana, who's a few tables away, sitting with Mateo and Parker. That's the rest of SES 8 except for Elaine, who sits alone, surrounded by a buffer zone of tables. People have been keeping their distance from her ever since she chucked this kid into the salad bar. Even in the lunchroom, Elaine rhymes with pain. While Aldo's staring at Kiana, I reach over and dump half a shaker of black pepper into his soup. I can't help it. It's almost not my fault. Raheem snickers and doodles a napkin sketch of Aldo, with smoke coming out of his ears. Meanwhile, Kiana catches Aldo looking at her. Embarrassed, he picks up his soup bowl and guzzles down what's left of it, pepper and all. A split second later, a green geyser of pea soup sprays across the room, propelled by a scream. "What'd you do that for?" he rasps. I can't answer because I'm laughing too hard. So is Raheem. When Aldo sees the napkin sketch, he stabs it with his spoon, which snaps in half. That gets us a caution from the lunchroom monitor, who raises the quiet alert level from green to amber on the traffic signal at the front of the cafeteria. "You've got to tone it down, man," I manage, fighting to control my laughter. "Everything makes you fly off the handle." "Not true," he bellows in my face, and the traffic signal goes red. Now, nobody's allowed to talk for the rest of lunch, and it's all Aldo's fault. Raheem and I exchange a fist bump under the table. Afterward, when we're walking back to room 17, everybody else is walking. I'm thumping on my crutches. I can't resist rubbing in a little more salt in Aldo's wounds. "Kiana was watching you the whole time," I assure him. "She probably thinks you're nuts or something." "Did I ask you to put a pound of pepper in my soup?" he demands. "Okay, but you don't have to get mad about it. You're mad at me, you're mad at Raheem, you're mad at the cafeteria for changing the chicken nugget recipe, you're mad at Ribbit." "I'm not mad at Ribbit," he mutters. "You said you were before." "Yeah, well, I changed my mind." "Fine," I agree. "Everything makes you mad except Ribbit." And I stop bugging him because I keep thinking about Mr. Kermit fighting with the office to get me in the pep rally. Back in room 117, with the rest of the class, we can't help noticing a bright green vuvuzela bent double sticking out of the teacher's trash can. "If Ribbit thinks he can get rid of all those things at one time," puts in Raheem, "he's in for a really rough spirit week." "I can't understand what makes him tick," puts in Kiana. "Most of the time he never opens his mouth, but blow a vuvuzela and he'll scream you like an opera." They made it make him mad," I say, with a wink at Aldo. "He's the Grinch," Mateo pipes up suddenly. "I thought he was Squidward," Parker reminds him. Mateo shakes his head. "The Grinch, definitely. The Grinch hates Christmas because he can't stand the noise. Well, Mr. Kermit hates Spirit Week because he can't stand vuvuzelas." "Everybody hates something," I retort. "I don't like lima beans. Am I a Grinch too?" "It's not just what you hate, it's why you hate it," Mateo replies seriously. "Indiana Jones hates snakes because he's afraid of them. Superman hates kryptonite because it's his weakness. The Wicked Witch of the West hates water because it makes her melt. But Mr. Kermit and the Grinch are both haters for the same reason: noise." Ribbit comes in, and the first thing he sees is all of us staring into the basket at the broken vuvuzela. He seems annoyed at first, but then his expression changes to one of sympathy. "I have some bad news about Spirit Week." "It's okay, Mr. Kermit," Kiana interrupts. "We know you tried your best to talk to the principal into letting us be part of it." "Let me tell you about Spirit." The teacher comes alive, making eye contact with each one of us as he speaks. "No one can command you to have spirit. Not principals, governors, presidents, or even kings. There's no spirit switch in your brain that can be flipped on or off. Spirit isn't a week that you can just put on a calendar. It doesn't come from posters or streamers or rallies or funny hat days. And it definitely doesn't come from making an ungodly racket with a cheap plastic instrument of torture that was invented purely for disturbing the peace. It's the most he's said to us all year. I can't explain it, but it feels like kind of a breakthrough. Although we're breaking through too. I have no clue. Maybe it's this. In all my years in school, I've never heard a teacher say something that was so completely and totally honest."